Welcome back to another premiere video in this series. Today, while investigating this one case of unsolved murder, the story itself, the research in it, took a while. As I was reading up on the case and documenting it, the murder and unsolved crime itself quickly turned into not just the murder that I thought it was going to be, but two murders and two unsolved murders at that. So today's unsolved murder and grave is that of Shannon Maureen Varley. Now I tried did my due diligence to try to reach out to the remaining family to get their side of this story, to give me some insight into who Shannon was. And in the end, none of them would return my calls. So I have to base this only on the few acquaintances, friends that she had that are still in the area, along with newspaper articles. But first, another case that is connected to Shannon Maureen Varley's murder. Shannon Maureen Varley's unsolved murder from 1975. Varley went missing just weeks after graduating high school with Diana Merkchx, age 20. Diana went missing under very strange circumstances from a nearby park where so many teenagers would gather to swim, to hang out, to show off their new cars, whatever it may be. She vanished from the area near the Point View fourplex apartment complex. These are buildings that you see on your screen were once apartment complexes. There were 4 buildings individually, but only 2 of the buildings survive to this day, boarded up long ago. Her body was later found, Diana Merkchx's body, was later found some 20 miles away in Sacagawea Park, murdered and clearly dumped out in the open. Police believe her killer committed the crime elsewhere. They also believed the murderer was someone she most likely knew. She was strangled to death, and a small scrap of rope was found near her body, but the complete rope was missing. Defensive wounds were also noted on both her hands and her forearms. At the time of her disappearance, people had formed into a group demanding justice for Diane. They started asking questions and showing up and poking around in the case. In some circumstances, according to police reports that I've been able to obtain from back in 1975, show that this group of individuals had shown up at tips, places where the police had been sent to, individuals to talk to who may have been involved, showed up before the police got there, and they also showed up just after the police. So they were most likely listening in on police scanners at that time. It is unknown exactly how Shannon Varley knew Diana, other than from high school itself. They had several acquaintances and friends in common, but there is no definite connection between the two. They both graduated, however, from Columbia High School. Yes, this is the same high school that Sharon Tate, the actress who was killed by the Manson family, actually went to. This group was, initially started about women who wanted justice. They wanted justice for women and women's rights. You have to understand the environment and the location where these two crimes were committed. In this area, everything was controlled by the U.S. government. The post office was the government, obviously. The electricity was controlled by the government. The government chose where you could live and where you couldn't live. They chose who could open a business and who would be successful in business. That's just the time and the location of it. Everything was controlled. They said everyone had to be in by 10 o'clock on every night of the week. Everyone had to be in their homes by 10 o'clock in the evening. Yes, it was an unstated curfew, but everyone knew by 10 p.m. you had to be in unless it was a Friday or Saturday night. And if they said you went to church, you would go to church. That's how controlling the government was of this area. They had one mission. The town was built for one reason, and it was part of the Manhattan Project, building the parts for the atomic bomb that was initially dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They built the parts for it as part of the Manhattan Project. Again, 90% of the employment in this area at that time, in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, was all controlled by the U.S. government. Diana's crime would never be solved. Shannon Maureen Varley. A little background on Shannon. She was the youngest of 5 children. Again, like I had said, she went to Columbia High School, the same high school that Sharon Tate went to. She worked as a secretary for the Atomic Energy Commission, or the AEC. If you've ever lived in a government town anywhere near a nuclear reactor, you are very familiar with the AEC. She loved her cat. She dated off and on through high school, but wasn't considered dating anyone seriously there in this period of time around her death. Although she did have one individual that she was kind of sweet on, but they dated off and on. They weren't taking it to the next level. They weren't considering marriage or being even, monogamous to each other. Not that Shannon was out, hanging out and doing things with, the wrong crowd. It's just they were just more friends than they were anything else. Shannon loved her Triumph car. It was a little 2-seater sports car that she drove everywhere. It wasn't in perfect condition, but it was hers. It was something that she saved up herself to actually buy. Her friends said that she was a bright, fun-loving, and always loved to laugh. She could walk into a room of not knowing anyone, and she could leave that room with everyone having a positive impression upon her, and her having a positive impression upon them. She had dreams of someday leaving this 2-bit Hoduk town and going away, moving to a larger city to, find her dreams, to fulfill her dreams. The day that Shannon Maureen Varley disappeared. As you see here on her gravestone, it says that she was pronounced dead on August 8th, 1975. According to authorities, they don't know exactly when she actually died, but they do believe she had been dead for some time when her body was actually found. Matter of fact, according to the coroner, his best guess was Shannon Maureen Varley had been dead for 3 months when they finally found her body. You must remember of what life was like in 1975. If you were over the age of 18 and you disappeared, you as an adult, or as a young adult, they wouldn't even take a missing persons report for you until you had been missing for at least 24 hours. In this case, the police made several bumbling mistakes when it came to the disappearance of Shannon. First, not taking it seriously at all, even when her family went to the law enforcement to report her actually missing. They took the report after 24 hours, but didn't take it seriously. They didn't even put out a BOA, be on the lookout for Shannon or her car or anything, until almost 48 hours later. She wasn't even driving her car, but they still put a missing persons, and missing car report out. She was borrowing the car of her on-again, off-again boyfriend in El Camino that was later found exactly where Shannon was supposed to be, in the park nearby. The manner of death for Shannon has always been a heated debate. The police initially said that the manner of death was by homicide, of a gunshot, one gunshot to the back of the head. Killed, as you may say, homicide or a hit. Somebody killed her and then dumped her body there. They know she was not murdered there where she was found, in a marshy area next to a cattle pond, which I'm showing you video footage of a desert landscape right now in black and white. That farm has long since closed. It last operated in 1982, about 7 years after Shannon's body was found in this marshy area. The pond that the cattle would use for drinking has long stopped being filled. It wasn't a natural pond. It was just a small pond that the farmer flooded on purpose just so it would retain water for the cattle. But back to the manner of death. On her actual body, from what records I was able to find online, Shannon had cuts, bruises on her legs, her hands, and bruising on the actual forearms themselves, along with bruising to her backside, as if somebody had beat her severely and she put up a hell of a fight. When it came to actual possible people who may have committed the murder, the police initially thought that Shannon was kidnapped by a local pimp. Yes, a pimp, the controller of prostitutes. They thought that he had something to do with it because he had kidnapped another 17-year-old girl from the same park in a close proximity to where the El Camino that she was borrowing from her on-again, off-again boyfriend was found at the time. But that was never connected to Shannon, other than it was just a lead, a tip that it may have been, and that somebody that they focused on for a long period of time. Back to the bumbling mistakes of the local sheriff's department and police department in this case. A lot of the evidence that could have been preserved in and around Shannon's body and there in the park in the El Camino itself was never properly stored, tagged, or even registered in the logs as evidence. On her actual body, they did recover a partial DNA match that did not match the pimp at all. They did find an additional hair fiber that was found on her body, but it was not preserved correctly, so no DNA was ever to be discovered from that hair fiber. These items were just thrown into a bag, not logged properly, not preserved properly, so the case went cold. Another possible suspect for Shannon was a serial killer who had worked in and around the area and also had traveled to Walla Walla, Washington and Clarkston, Washington. He was ruled as a possible suspect because of his proximity of work to the actual disappearance. He was in the area when Shannon Varley disappeared, but they never actually really took that seriously. They didn't investigate him much until years later when it was turned out that they knew he had killed other women in and around a geographic 500-mile radius of where Shannon had disappeared. The list of suspects was short. Her boyfriend was ruled out, a complete ironclad alibi for being at work at the time. But they never caught the murderer of Shannon or Diane. The two knew each other from high school, but yet one was murdered, dumped in a local park less than 20 miles away from where Shannon would disappear. Then, months later, Shannon's body would be found again, miles away, dumped in a marshy area that used to be for cattle in the middle of nowhere. The two cases, are they connected? Are they the same murderer? All we know at this point is all these years later, no one is investigating the case past 2014. No one has even signed the log to look at the evidence since then. Thank you for joining me today. Again, if you enjoyed this content, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. I would really appreciate it. And you have a terrific weekend.